Outside the Box Reviews, Giant Monster Mania. We're taking a look at the Bandai Tamashii Nation's Robot Spirits number 58 rebuild of Evangelion Unit 1. And this figure is another example of the increased creeping scope of my Bandai Tamashii Nation's collecting. Started off with monster arts, went into some Figuarts, went into an Ultra Act figure, and now I'm on their Robot Spirits line, picking up a figure from one of my favorite animes from back in the day, Neon Genesis Evangelion, which has recently kind of come back in a series of movies that started off following what the TV show did for the most part, and I just watched the third one, and I still don't know what the hell just happened. But a friend had recommended I pick up some of these figures, check them out, and let's say right here, I am not disappointed. So let's go ahead and take a closer look and check out all the cool things this figure comes with. In standard Bandai Tamashii Nation's form, we get a ton of different hands for this figure. 6 pairs total and then 1 single hand. So we get a pair of karate chopping hands, a pair of wide open hands, a pair of fists, a pair of gripping hands, though the trigger finger is a little bit extended, which I thought was kind of weird. Some more open grabbing hands that are made for the AT field. Some kind of spread out, I can't even describe it. There's obviously differences between all these hands, but they're just more spread out but kind of relaxed hands. And then we get a true trigger finger single right hand. All of the hands feature great detail. We have the knuckles kind of raised up, the yellow dot on the index finger. Fingers themselves are pretty smooth and nice looking. And then some kind of paneling there on the inside of them, which really brings out the robotic look. And of course the peg hole at the back, which is pretty tight when you get it on the peg itself, so I would be careful pegging these in and out of the figure. The hand is also not super rubberized, but a little pliable, which is good for getting the weapons in the hand. Another cool accessory this figure comes with is the umbilical cable. This goes on the back of the figure. You can see the kind of, I always thought it looked like a gas pump handle here. You have a single peg that will peg into the back, and then we have the black wire, which doesn't go to anything, but there is a bendy wire in here, so you can actually pose this around and maneuver it, which I think is really, really nice. I've had some other Eva figures in the past where this was just kind of a loose, floppy cable, and it never really looked right when you couldn't move it around the way you wanted it to. To attach it to the figure, you can see there's a hole right there on the back, so you can just take this, pop it right in there, and you're ready to go fight some angels. For weapons, we get 2 of the trademark rifles for the Eva. Now, of course, you only can use 1 at a time, really, because he only has 1 trigger finger, but I believe the second one may be for some of the other Eva units that I don't think come with them. But it has a nice kind of gunmetal gray color to most of it. We have the kind of more intricate designs here in the back. We have this blue fin up here at the top, no pun intended. Not hard at all to get the rifle in the Eva's hand. He holds it pretty darn well. It's a little bit loose, but really just the way it's shaped, you can get it to rest in a very comfortable position. We also get 2 of the progressive knives. Obviously, once again, you have an extra one for another Eva if you want, or I guess you could dual wield these. But they're very, very nice looking. A nice gunmetal blade with a silvery edge to it. A little red detailing up there, and the black handle. Overall, I think it's a very impressive looking weapon. Based on the size of it, it's obvious that this would never fit inside the shoulder pauldron like they do in the show, but it's still a cool weapon. With the tighter gripping hand, the Eva holds this very, very well, and you can hold it either right side up or kind of upside down, like you're gonna plunge the knife down into somebody's face. And last but not least, we have what I'll freely admit is my least favorite accessory here, the AT field. It's a cool representation of the effect you see in the show, the kind of honeycomb shape with concentric pieces in the middle. You can see there is a hole in the center, and that's where your Eva 01 to grip. You can kind of have it like pulling apart the AT field. Obviously, you'd probably use both hands for the shape that we have here. Interesting idea. I don't know if I'm ever going to display it with that because I feel like it really obscures the figure from view, so I don't really know why I'd want to put it on a shelf like that. Maybe for some kind of ACBA art I might mess with it, but it's something I'm not going to use all that often. The part that really bugs me though is the stand it comes on. It starts off with this kind of honeycomb shaped base, which matches the AT field effect. I think it's kind of a cool designed base instead of using the standard Tamashii stage. There's a peg there in the middle of it, which is pretty tiny, not a standard Tamashii arm size or anything like that. And then we have this little middle piece that pegs right in there. Then we have this clear riser, which will peg into that, give us some height there on the stand. And then we get the parts that confuse me. I did buy this figure used, but it did come with instructions, but I've been having a little bit of a hard time kind of interpreting those instructions because I don't read Japanese. We have this one little clip. It's got 4 holes in it and a peg, and that pops right in the top there. Then we also get this little clip with a hole through it. And I've still not been able to ascertain what the purpose of this is. I've been kind of just putting it here so that will help support the weight of the AT field effect, because that's where the instructions show it living, but I can't figure out what it's actually doing besides maybe just adding a little support there. Then on the bottom of the AT field, we have these two small holes and a similar clip here that will pop right into those two holes to hold that in place. And then it pegs into the rest of the stand here. Now, this is where my confusion really comes up, because there's 4 pegs to slide into the holes on this stand, and I can only really get the top or the bottom to be solid at one time. So I'm not sure if the bottom's supposed to be solid, leaving the top a little loose, or if it's supposed to be the top really solid to leave the bottom a little loose. I really just can't tell what the best setup for this is, and the AT field does tend to fall off this stand if I'm not careful with it. And you know what? This is as close as I can get this accessory to work without just driving myself up the freaking wall. It is really obnoxious to get the Ava to hold this. I basically don't even have it on the stand right now. The Ava is just holding it in its own hands. But this is a rough idea. The hands coming through the middle, ripping the AT field apart. But even if I'm not a big fan of that accessory, I am a huge fan of the sculpting and paintwork on this figure. The paint is ridiculously clean everywhere on it, and I think the sculpt just looks perfect for the character it's supposed to be. Now, this is the rebuild of Evangelion version, the new movie version basically. So there is a lot more neon green paint on this figure than there was on the original, but I actually kind of really like the look that it gives. The first head sculpt here is really nicely done. It has all the appropriate panel lines and fins. Most of the panel lines are actually nice and highlighted with kind of a black edge to them, or deep enough sculpting where you can see where everything belongs, which I definitely appreciate. We have the yellow eye kind of rimmed in black to give it an ominous glowing look. We have the red lines going through it. We have the dark black lining around the jaw. We have the big fin coming off the back of the head there as well. And the horn on this figure is actually interchangeable. We get 2 sets of each version of the horn. This version is a more rigid plastic, and you can see you can actually pop it right off the front there and insert whatever new one you want. But this is more rigid. It looks really nice. Sculpt and paint on it is pretty much everything you want it to be. And then I actually have the rubberized one on the interchangeable head. I don't really notice enough detail lost here with the soft version that would make me kind of not want to use the soft version. I guess maybe this might flop around and not look as good in some photo shoots or something, but I'd almost rather have the soft one on there just to not risk breaking it. But this is the pissed off, kind of more animalistic head sculpt. We have the mouth wide open. We have the cool red interior. No hinge or anything on the jaw, which would have been kind of neat. But overall, a very, very cool looking head. I love the pissed off expression here. The neck has some great yellowy orange panel lining on it as well. The chest has the kind of little plug pieces or whatever those are supposed to be, but very, very nicely detailed. We have the shoulder pauldrons that are classic for most of the Evas. The one complaint I kind of have with this figure is that these ride a little high on the figure itself. They are on ball joints, so you can move them around, kind of similar to the shoulder pieces on like Dragon Ball figures from Figuarts. But the way the hinge kind of makes an L shape, it all sits a little high over the shoulder, and you can see it's kind of hollowed out to allow the shoulder joint to fit in between it, but unless you kind of put it at an angle, you can't get the piece resting directly on the shoulder itself. Around the back here, we do have the entry plug. There's no removable piece. You can't open it up and see the plug or anything like that, but still very, very nicely detailed back here. We already talked about the umbilical cord plug, the kind of spine effect going down the back and down the chest as well. We do have that middle green piece, which is another new addition, having the neon green section of the torso. The arms are nicely done. We kind of have a generic symbol up here at the shoulder, which I think they're using in the new series, instead of having the 01 or Ava 1 on there. More nice panel lining and everything going through the arm. Also here on the forearm, no identifying mark. I really can't remember if they had that in the movies. I'm just so used to the original Ava series having Ava 01 test or whatever written across it. We do have the really strange looking pelvis for the Ava with the part sticking out the front and almost a little bit of a tail on the back. We have the kind of higher hips up here with the vents in it. Big knee pads starting green, going black, and having the orange tops. And then some really, really freaking awesome feet. The green guards right up there at the top, which are actually on ball joints, so they'll move around. And the purple feet with the orange bottom to them, and then even great detailing there on the bottom of the feet with some circles of orange and kind of a grayish brown detailing there. When it comes to articulation, this may be one of the most satisfying figures I've ever picked up when it comes to posing. It just feels almost effortless to pose this figure around and get him into cool positions. We have a swivel hinge joint at the bottom of the neck with this berserk head. You only get to move up and down so much because it kind of lowers this back piece, and then you have the chin to worry about in front. But when you put on the standard head, you kind of get a little more range of motion out of it just for that factor. You can also swivel left or right at it. Then we have a ball joint at the base of the neck, so you can go pretty far down with the neck, pretty far up. You can also pivot side to side as well as rotate, which is just phenomenal. You can just get so many cool poses out of the head and neck there, and they really do look natural as long as you don't really expose the joint too much. Absolutely love it. Alright, I talked about how the shoulder pauldrons are on ball joints, so they can kind of go a little forward back, a little up and down. The shoulder piece that it connects to almost seems like it may be on some kind of ball joint as well. It does seem to move along with the hinge. I just can't tell if that's it not being super connected to the body or if there's another real joint going on there, but good range of motion with those, which aren't really even a joint. We have a double ball joint there at the shoulder, so there's a ball joint basically inside the figure body, and then a ball joint here at the actual shoulder. So the arm itself can kind of shift forward, back, up or down. You could swing it forward, back, and then of course go pretty darn far out to the side for a figure with such big bulky shoulders. We also do get a bicep swivel, which I think is really well hidden with the way they shape this. We get what I guess kind of amounts to a double jointed elbow. It's one of those ball hinge pieces we get a lot with wrists and Figuart figures, but it's absolutely fantastic. You get a really nice bend there. You can swivel on either end of that joint as well, which is an added bonus. And then speaking of that joint, we're more used to it in wrists, and here we have it again. So you could hinge up or down. You could also rotate the hand and change what axis that hinge is on. Then you can also swivel at the wrist as well. The mid-torso is basically made up of ball joints. So we have one kind of going into the chest, and we have this middle section here, then we have the lower torso. And unless you pull it really back, you can't really even see those joints because of the way these pieces are on there. But you get a great range. He'll bend very far forward. He'll bend his back very far back. We could tilt side to side with it without issue. We can rotate at any of those joints, and we can kind of manipulate them to make it look like it's a more gradual bend. Absolutely love this kind of ab/waist joint they gave the Eva. It's just phenomenal. The legs, I'm actually really surprised. I thought the legs would be more akin to what we see in Figuarts, where they might have the drop down hinge or anything like that. But no, we just get kind of more simple joints. They'll kick very far forward at the hip, kick pretty far back. We can go a really good amount out to the side, though it does seem possible these legs would pop off if you're not too careful, but I think it's just ball joints. And then we can, of course, swivel there at the upper leg. Another phenomenal double-jointed knee there, where you can bend it all the way back, which is fantastic. Once again, I already mentioned this little shield up here is on a ball joint. The foot itself is on a kind of a complex joint. There's a hinge there that will let it move up and down. Of course, you can see you could use that green piece to kind of fill in the gap. And then there's a separate hinge that will let it have an ankle pivot. And I guess that original joint will let you also do a rotation. And then you have a hinge there at the toe, so you can kick those toes very, very far up. And you can move them just a little bit down as well, which I don't really see why you would, but it's there. And for a size comparison that's going to be completely not helpful to you unless you're looking to buy a new Eva figure and you haven't bought one since the early 2000s, here are my old Eva figures that I still have kicking around. On the left there, we have the Sega Eva 01, which you can see is quite a bit taller and a lot less detailed and a lot less articulated as well, which also bugged me with that figure. And then on the right, we have the Kyoto Eva 04, which is also quite a bit larger and stuck in a weird dynamic pose. And looking back at these makes me actually really happy to have a more usable Evangelion figure, even if he is the shortest of the bunch. And then as a more modern Bandai Tamashii Nations comparison, on the left we have the Spitfire Godzilla 2014, and on the right we have the Ultra Act Ultraman Renewal version. I think this is where you really care about the size comparison. I think the Eva actually looks really good next to Godzilla. I always kind of have this discussion about scale when it comes to these things, and while they're not technically in scale with one another, I believe the Evas are much smaller than Godzilla. If you're looking at it in terms of a guy in a suit, which neither of these characters were, but in my mind they work well with each other. They have a similar eye line, and I think they look good together if you were posing them. Ultraman also pretty much in scale with these by my terminology. He's definitely a bit bulkier. I believe the new Figuarts Ultraman is going to be downsized from this, so he may actually be an even better scale with these other two. There's not not much more I can really say about this figure. I absolutely love it. It's really the articulation that puts it over the edge for me. This thing is just so easy and fun to pose. And while Monster Arts and Ultra Act and Figuarts, at least the Dragon Ball Z Figuarts I've picked up, all kind of share that characteristic, this is more so. This, to me, just feels to be the most fluid to pose. He's very easy to balance. He just feels like a very solid piece when you are posing him. A lot of the other figures, I always feel like they're maybe 75% to where I'd want them to be when it comes to articulation. They have a lot of things that kind of just get in the way of getting the exact pose I'm looking for. I feel like this figure can pretty much do it all. There's maybe a few different things I would improve, but in terms of cramming articulation into a figure without disrupting the sculpt, I think they've nailed it here. The detail on it is great. All the different parts that the Eva comes with are cool. They all make sense for the character. They're all very classic. Classic enough that I think even if you're not into the new movies, but you're a fan of the original series of Evangelion, you'll probably still get your money's worth because especially the rifle and the progressive knife are very, very classic accessories for Unit 1. And this figure is going to get a very, very high recommend. Not just to you guys, but to myself as well, because I've already gone out and purchased a couple other ones to add to my collection. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. Also check me out on Facebook, link below. And until next time, this has been our Outside the Box Reviews, Giant Monster Mania. Stay tuned for more to come.